He paid rent to steal my life by silent screams. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You know, the worst kind of fear isn't the kind that jumps out at you from a dark corner. It's not the monster, the ghost, or the killer with an axe. The worst kind of fear is the kind that moves in, unpacks its bags, and pays you rent. It's the fear that smiles at you in the hallway, asks you how your day was, and uses your own coffee pot to make its morning brew. It's the fear you invite into your home because you needed to make an extra $400 a month. I'm telling you this because you need to know it can happen. Because it happened to me. My name is Alex, and my life is no longer my own. It was stolen from me, piece by piece, by the man who lived in my spare bedroom. It all started out of pure, boring necessity. I'm a freelance graphic designer, which is a nice way of saying I spend 10 hours a day in my home office, fueled by caffeine and the terror of looming deadlines. My house isn't just where I live. It's my workspace, my studio, my sanctuary. Every corner of it was mine. After a couple of slow months, though, my sanctuary started to feel expensive. The spare bedroom, the one that had become a glorified storage closet for old electronics and forgotten hobbies, seemed like the obvious solution. Rent it out. Get a long-term tenant. Easy, passive income. I used one of those popular rental apps. I took some flattering pictures of the room, wrote up a friendly but firm description, quiet professional preferred, and hit publish. The applications trickled in. Most were non-starters. Then Julian's message appeared. It was perfect. Professionally written, polite, straightforward. He was a consultant, he said, in town for a 6 to 12-month project. He needed a quiet place to stay. He was, in his own words, practically a ghost. We did a quick video call. He looked exactly like his profile picture. Late 40s, neatly trimmed graying hair, kind eyes behind a pair of simple black-rimmed glasses. He was calm, well-spoken, and utterly unremarkable. He was the human equivalent of beige wallpaper. He was perfect. I ran the basic background check the app provided. It came back clean. No criminal record, no red flags. So, I accepted. The first month was a dream. Julian was exactly as advertised. He was a ghost. His car would be gone before I woke up, and he'd return late in the evening. On the rare occasions we were both home, I'd hear nothing from his room. He was incredibly neat. The shared bathroom was always spotless after he used it. We'd have brief, pleasant chats in the kitchen. I learned nothing about him, but I didn't mind. He'd ask about my day, nod thoughtfully as I talked about a difficult client or a creative block, and offer some vague, encouraging platitude. When I'd ask about his consulting work, he'd just smile and say, "Oh, you know, spreadsheets and conference calls, the usual." He was the perfect tenant. I felt so smart, so lucky. That was my first mistake. The shift was so subtle at first that I didn't even register it as a shift. It was just odd. It started with the coffee. I drink a very specific, slightly expensive brand of coffee from a local roaster. I don't advertise it. It just sits in a plain, unlabeled canister on my counter. One morning, I came into the kitchen to find a brand new bag of it sitting next to the canister. Julian was there, pouring himself a cup. "Morning, Alex," he said cheerfully. "Saw you were running low, so I picked some up. It's excellent stuff." I was a little taken aback. "Oh, wow. Thanks, Julian. You didn't have to do that." "Nonsense," he said with that placid smile. "Least I can do. We have the same taste, it seems." It was a nice gesture, right? But something about it felt off. How did he know which brand it was? The bag I'd bought was long gone. I brushed it off. Maybe he saw me bring it in one day. It was a coincidence. Then, a week later, I was on a Zoom call with a client, deep in my office with the door shut. We were discussing a branding project, and I used a bit of industry jargon, something about optimizing the semiotics of the color palette. It's a pretentious phrase I use to make clients feel like they're getting their money's worth. Later that evening, Julian and I were in the kitchen, and he was telling me about his day. "It was just endless meetings," he said, shaking his head. trying to get the team to understand the semiotics of the new marketing push. I froze for a second, my hand on the refrigerator door. Semiotics. It's not a word you hear every day. He said it so casually, like it was part of his regular vocabulary. I stared at him, but he was just looking into his mug, swirling the dregs of his tea. Again, I told myself to calm down. It's a word. People use words. It was another coincidence, but it was the second time he had mirrored a specific, personal detail of my life. The real alarm bell, the one I couldn't ignore, rang a few days after that. I have a habit of listening to music on my noise-canceling headphones while I work. Not just any music. I get into these weird obsessive kicks. That week, it was an obscure instrumental synthwave artist from the 80s. I had one particular track on a loop for hours, a simple, haunting melody. My office door was closed and locked. That evening, I was walking down the hall and I passed Julian's room. And I heard him, through the closed door, humming. He was humming that exact melody, the obscure instrumental track I had been listening to in my soundproofed bubble. There was no possible way he could have heard it. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. This was something else. A knot of dread began to form in my stomach. The feeling of being in my sanctuary, my safe space, began to curdle. My home no longer felt like my own. The paranoia started to set in. I became hyper-aware of him. Every creak of the floorboards, every time the faucet ran in the bathroom, I started making sure my office door was not just closed, but locked every time I left the room, even if it was just to go to the kitchen. But the feeling of being watched, of being studied, was relentless. One afternoon, I came back from a walk and went to my office. The lock clicked open as usual, but the door swung open just a little too easily. I knew, with a certainty that made my skin prickle, that it had been opened. I looked around. Everything was in its place. My monitors, my drawing tablet, my notebooks. But my mouse was moved, just an inch to the left of where I always leave it. It was a tiny detail, but it was my detail. My heart was pounding. I sat down and my eyes darted to my computer. It was on the login screen as it should be, but then I looked at the bottom corner. Last login, 7 minutes ago. I'd been gone for 20. Someone had been on my computer. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a mix of fear and anger. I went straight to Julian's door and knocked, harder than I intended. He opened it, looking calm as ever. "Julian," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Were you just in my office? On my computer?" He blinked, his expression one of mild confusion. "What? No, of course not, Alex. I've been in here reading. Why would I go into your office?" He was so convincing, so genuinely perplexed, that for a second I doubted myself. But I knew. The door was unlocked, and someone logged into my computer. He furrowed his brow, a perfect performance of concern. "Are you sure? Maybe you just forgot you logged in before you left? We all do things like that. Gaslighting." He was standing in my hallway, in my house, telling me that my own memory was wrong. But his denial was a brick wall. I had no proof, just the moved mouse and a login timestamp. I backed down, mumbling something about being stressed, but the trust between us, what little there was shattered. That night, I did what I should have done in the first place. I tried to find him online. I searched his full name, the name of the consulting firm he'd vaguely mentioned. I searched for hours, using every trick I knew. I found nothing, absolutely nothing. No LinkedIn profile, no Facebook page, no company. Website, no old news articles. It was 2025. Nobody has zero digital footprint unless they are actively, meticulously erasing it. Julian wasn't just a private person. He was a ghost, a blank slate, and he was living under my roof. The final straw came a week later. I was on the phone with my sister, a deeply personal call. We were talking about our mom's health issues, discussing sensitive financial details about her care. It was a hushed, Private conversation held in my supposedly secure office. The next morning, I was getting my breakfast when Julian came into the kitchen. He poured his coffee and leaned against the counter, a thoughtful look on his face. "You know, Alex," he said, his voice casual, "it's funny how expensive elder care has gotten. A friend of mine is going through it with his mother. The costs are just staggering. It's a real shame there isn't more support for families." He looked right at me. There was no hint of malice in his eyes, just that same placid, gentle curiosity. But the message was crystal clear. "I heard you. I know. That was it. I was done. My sanctuary had become a prison, and my house guest was my warden. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't work. I felt like a bug under a microscope. That afternoon, I printed out a formal 30-day notice to vacate. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I waited for him to get home. When he walked in, I met him in the living room and handed him the paper. I had a whole speech prepared, a list of reasons, but all I could manage to say was, "I think it's time." I expected an argument. I expected anger, yelling, a confrontation. What I got was so much worse. He took the paper, read it, and then looked up at me with that unnervingly calm smile. "Of course, Alex," he said, his voice as smooth as Riverstone. "I understand completely. I'll be out by the end of next month." And just like that, he turned and walked to his room, closing the door softly behind him. His easy acceptance was the most terrifying thing he could have done. That final month was a slow, deliberate form of psychological torture. He knew that I knew he was watching me, and he started to enjoy it. The mimicry became blatant, a grotesque parody. One week, I got a new haircut. 2 days later, Julian came home with his haircut in the exact same style. Another day, he walked out of his room wearing a dark green Henley shirt, identical to one I had worn the day before. He even started to adopt my posture, the way I lean against the counter, the way I cross my arms when I'm thinking. He was a funhouse mirror, reflecting a distorted, creepy version of me back at myself. It felt like he wasn't just invading my space anymore. He was trying to crawl inside my skin. I barely left the house. I barricaded myself in my office, counting the days until he was gone. I felt like I was losing my mind, seeing shadows in every corner, hearing whispers in the silence. Then, finally, the day came. The last day of the month. I couldn't stand to be in the house with him, so I left early and spent the entire day at a coffee shop, just waiting. When I finally came home that evening, his car was gone. I walked inside, my heart thumping with a mixture of hope and fear. I went straight to the spare room. It was open. Inside, it was pristine. The bed was stripped. The surfaces were wiped clean. The closet was empty. There was not a single trace that he had ever lived there. It was like the last 6 months had been a fever dream, a wave of relief so powerful it almost brought me to. My knees washed over me. It was over. He was gone. I was free. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat on my couch, taking the first deep, truly relaxed breath I had taken in months. My house was mine again. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I glanced at it. It was a notification from my bank. A fraud alert. My blood turned to ice. I fumbled to unlock the phone. The message read, "Did you just apply for a $20,000 personal loan? If this was not you, please contact us immediately." My breath caught in my throat. Before I could even react, another notification popped up, an email from my credit card company. "Thank you for adding an authorized user to your account. Your new card will be mailed shortly." Then another, and another. A credit score alert, an application confirmation for a new cell phone plan. My digital life was being dismantled and reassembled in real time, right in front of my eyes. The full, horrifying truth crashed down on me. Julian wasn't just a weirdo, he was a professional, a predator, The mimicry, the listening, the lack of an online presence. It wasn't a strange personality quirk. It was research. He wasn't just trying to copy my habits, he was studying them. He learned the sound of my voice, my vocabulary, my personal history, my financial anxieties. He didn't just want to live in my house. He wanted to live in my life. My laptop, sitting on the couch next to me, chimed with a new email. My eyes darted to the screen. It was from my biggest client, the one I had been working with for years. The subject line read, "Final design. Drafts." My stomach dropped. I hadn't sent any drafts today. I opened the email with trembling fingers. It read, "Hi, Alex. These new drafts are perfect. Exactly what we were looking for. Just sent the final payment to the new account details you provided. Thanks for the quick turnaround." I stared at the screen, my mind a vortex of static. He hadn't just stolen my data. He had stolen my work, my talent. He had locked me out of my own professional life, redirecting my hard-earned money to an account I'd never seen. The quiet, unassuming tenant was gone. But the real Julian, the one who was now, for all intents and purposes, Alex, was just getting started. He had every password, every answer to every security question, every intimate detail of my history. He has my life, and me, I'm the ghost, now. I'm the one with no proof, a man trying to convince the world that I am who I say I am. The worst part is that gentle, smiling face. That's what the banks hear on the phone. That's what my clients see in their emails. They're all talking to him. And I'm in here, in this house that is no longer my sanctuary, but my cage, a ghost in the shell of my own existence.